Race in America, along with the Global School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Morgan State University in Baltimore and the Reed College of West Virginia. Now here at the School of Communications at Brigham Young University, we have students viewing from the atrium of the Brim Hall building. Now joining me here on set are film producer and anchor Temu Smith and BYU history professor, Dr. Cameron McCoy. Now, as I said, here we are now 50 years after the release of the Kerner Commission report. Let's talk about how far we've come in terms of what has been done and what has not been done. Now, Cameron, I understand for your dissertation, you needed to have a firm foundation on topics concerning race in America. As a historian, how would you answer those two questions? What has been done? What has not been done since Kerner?
Well, thanks for having me today. It's an honor, and it's good to see you again with us not being on the track together, with me chasing you typically most of the time. But what has been done is we've seen a definite focus on legislative matters. We've seen a focus on empowering social groups, and that has been great. However, what hasn't been done, despite what has been done, has been a change in attitudes, perceptions, as well as how we approach how these reform measures should help minority groups. And so even though things have happened and the policies have been set in place and the legislative reform has been landmark, we still are struggling with, as a nation, just how attitudes can change and how perceptions change, as well as teachings.
Mm-hmm. And so go back again, just backing up to what has been done. We know there was a case, Loving versus Virginia. Mm-hmm. Can you just go ahead and give us a little background on that case?
All right, 1967, it became legal for a black man or a black woman to marry a white man or a white woman. That was 1967. And so that was a landmark legislative decision that took place in the United States, which has allowed our nation to be even more diverse, right? And also has debunked many myths that we've had scientists try to say about people of African descent and who they are, and making a mongrelization of our society.
Right. And then we have another case, Plessy versus Ferguson. I was talking about separate but equal, but is that the case? Is that really the case?
So this is in a case from 1896 in which separate but equal came to the forefront, and although separate, the equality was never there. And really, I would argue that it's equity. I would argue it's more of an equity thing rather than equality. But what happens is whites will have the exact same facilities, even though segregation is still in place in the law of the land, and blacks will have access to the exact same facilities. However, it's always an economic issue that comes into play. And so although the facilities may look the same and function the same, they're not being treated the same or maintained the same.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. Temu, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I agree with Dr. McCoy, and also I would just like to add that I would add that in today's society, that perception actually has this perceived perception has changed, and because people feel like they get it, that is the danger of it. They feel like things have changed, and so because things have changed and because we're people of color are no longer being segregated out, like we're not being partitioned off in most cases, then they feel like things are better. And because they feel like things are better, they're no longer checking themselves. And that is dangerous because things have changed, but they're not better.
Things have changed.
We have not arrived.
Mm-hmm. I know that as a film producer, author, I mean, you know a lot about LDS church history. So here we are in Utah, obviously. Yes. Utah, there are a lot of members of the Church of Jesus Christ. There was a turning point in the church history. The church has some history with race. Can you talk to me about that?
Well, the history is, for those who are unfamiliar with it, at the beginning of the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as Mormons, they allowed blacks in to have the priesthood. Black people were full-fledged members of their church. And then at the turn of the new leadership, then blacks were no longer given leadership opportunities. and no longer given the priesthood because of the curse of Cain, the perceived curse of Cain. And so because of that, with petitioning, people petitioned against this school, BYU, because it's a school that is owned and run by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And in 1978, black men were given the priesthood, and they were given leadership opportunities, or that ban was lifted. And so moving forward, we just actually celebrated the 40th anniversary of blacks in the priesthood, or the reinstatement of blacks in the priesthood and blacks in the church. And so I think that what has changed here?
Yes, what has been done, what has not been done.
What has been done? Well, I can tell you, first of all, what has not been done is sometimes when we get through a period, we don't want to look back and we don't want to talk about it. And there's this shaming that comes with anyone who wants to acknowledge or give a nod to the past, or say, this happened in the past, what is happening now? There's that shaming. So the LDS Church, after the announcement that blacks would have the priesthood and that the ban had been lifted, they didn't want to turn back and look back. They didn't want to acknowledge it. And because of that, there were lots of things that happened. And then moving forward, because we just celebrated our 40th anniversary, and when I say our, it's because I am LDS also. I'm a member of that church. But we just celebrated the 40th anniversary, and I think that as an organization, it was the first time in my lifetime that I've seen any organization in the United States collectively bring together the African diaspora, and like all of Africa, acknowledge that black people started somewhere, and that somewhere was in Africa. And because of slavery, we were, dispersed to other nations, other areas. And so the LDS Church had a celebration where we all were able to come together. We started in Africa, and then it acknowledged slavery, it acknowledged our past, and here we are, here we are today. So that was the first time that I've seen a celebration done of that sort. And I think that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is definitely in a position, if they wanted to start having those. It sparked a conversation, and we are able to start to move forward.
Yeah, I remember all three of us are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Some of you out there have probably seen these missionaries on bicycles with their suits on. At one point, I was one of those missionaries. I served my mission in Oakland, California. And, we have these beautiful temples. In Oakland, there's this nice, beautiful temple on the hillside.
Right.
And you'll be surprised how many times blacks approached me and said, I didn't know I could go up there. Which amazed me.
Didn't even know they could go up on the hillside.
They didn't know they were allowed to go up and onto the temple grounds.
But that's the same way when I'm a convert to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the temple was right near where I lived. And I didn't think I could go to it either. So that's a very common thing. And I grew up in the Northeast United States in DC and New York. So those are things that are common.
Yeah, so you have to try to think about where did that mindset come from? At what point did they start thinking that? But I felt that me serving in Oakland gave me opportunity to teach them. And yes, you are allowed. The church is open to members of all races.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And has always been open to members of all races. Mm-hmm. Not everybody could partake in the priesthood and the temple ordinances.
Yes. Now, Cameron, you talk about, we've had our first African-American president, and now we're seeing this rise in white nationalism here. So in some ways, are we going backwards?
So this goes back to the two questions you posed right at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And they're apt to the Kerner Commission as well, which serves as an incredible blueprint if the United States would like to move forward in a more seamless way, in a more constructive way. But April 1865, in Appomattox, Virginia, there's the signing of the treaty to end the Civil War. And you have Lee and Grant there, Generals Lee and Grant representing the North and the South. And then you move forward 150 plus years later, and there are arguments over structures standing. And I want to be very clear about this. In the same light as 1967 and 1968, the reason why violence erupts is not because people are angry. It is because you have these symbols that represent white power and a white power structure. And that is what blacks are upset about. And so although we've moved forward, somehow the United States, being true to itself, and like most people, hey, remember where you came from. Remember your history so you never forget. But a lot of times that history can be toxic and tragic. And those are the parts that the United States, citizens of the U.S. need to move forward and beyond. So while it is heritage for some people, it is hate for others. And so that's what always has us get rebounded back to the past. And is always not, and the thing is this, all three of us understand this. The history of the United States has this deep fissure, this deep wound. And it has wounds upon wounds and scars upon scars. And that's based on racial inequities and racial inequality, which built the United States. And it's just so integrated, we will never get beyond that. But how we move forward, how we exercise reform measures and legislation is what will allow us to heal in a better way. But that wound is just so deep, it's just something you will always have. It's like when you have a bad knee, you always know when the bad weather's coming, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's switch gears for a second now to Black representation in the media. So as we've been hearing, the Kerner report was tasked with determining factors that led to the unrest in 1967. Now, one of those factors identified was the lack of adequate representation among people assigning, reporting, and editing the media coverage. So a survey this year funded by the Ford Foundation asked a national sample of 3,000 people whether they agree with this statement. And the statement was, hiring more racial minorities in the news media as reporters and editors would improve the quality of news. Now, 50% of white Americans responded yes, compared to 71% of African Americans, 71% of Hispanic Americans, 67% of Asian Americans there. So you see, African Americans, yes, they tend to believe we need to increase representation. Temu, how would you have responded to this survey?
I would have responded, absolutely, we need to increase representation. And I also would say that, it reminds me of Megyn Kelly. I mean, is that okay to bring up on this station?
Relevant in the news right now. So.
Okay, so first of all, there's two things I want to say really quick. When Dr. McCoy was speaking about racism in America, it would be crazy for us not to acknowledge the fact that we have a president of the United States, of this free country, who said that he ran on a ticket with the promise that he was going to make America great again, and also this week announced that he was a nationalist. Is that not alarming to us? Is that not alarming to people that he's a nationalist? Like that, I'm not a globalist, I'm a nationalist. But does he not understand what that kind of, like what a nationalist is? Him being a white man and also announcing that he's a nationalist. I just wanted to just acknowledge that because it was driving me a little crazy here. Uh-huh. But, I think when I think about representation, I am a person that, used to watch a particular channel every morning as I was getting ready and getting my kids ready for school. And then they brought over Megyn Kelly. And Megyn Kelly arriving meant the departure of Tamron Hall. And that was just really heartbreaking to me for several reasons, because Megyn Kelly came from a network where racism seemed to be the topic their jump off topic for me. And she announced on that channel that not only was Santa Claus white, but while she was at it, Jesus Christ was too. And never apologized. It was very offensive to many just many people. You didn't have to be black to be offended by that, because for several reasons. But she never apologized, never tried to make that right. And then they bring her over to this other network, NBC, and when I think about representation, I think about the departure of Tamron Hall. I started to look at other women that had these national platforms, And you have Soledad O'Brien, but she comes in for the special, like, Blacks in America for the special reports. She's not there daily. You have Robin Roberts on, is it ABC? You have Hoda Kotb on NBC still. And Gail, what is Gail's last name? Oprah's friend, Gail.
Yes.
Like we know your last name, Gail, but we know you Oprah's friend too. But just looking at these people that have these platforms. Also, Joy Reid, she has this platform, and where is our representation at? And with a million Megyn Kellys, like a million women that look like her, white women get to see their representation all day long. Where is mine? And why did they have to bring that particular one over to replace Tamron Hall with, or meaning that Tamron Hall had to exit?
Yeah, and then we have this incident this week, the blackface comment.
Lord have mercy. And now she's gone, now she's gone. And that was also inevitable because she kept getting away with those types of comments. Mm-hmm. It was inevitable that she would make another one.
Mm-hmm. Cameron, any thoughts on this representation?
When I looked at it, the one thing her apology interview was the one that really stood out to me. Mm-hmm. Where I think what was disturbing to me is I was fine with the apology. You knew it was going to come, right? It's a natural reflex to those types of things, especially when you're backed in the corner and I'm about to take a PR hit and a financial hit because of my comments. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to invite 2 black people on, a black male and a black female, onto my show. And I was okay with her apologizing. What really surprised me was just how so many people applauded the apology. Correct. It was a standing ovation. And I don't know why that bothered me so much, but it made me just recoil a little bit and think about, when do people start getting a pat on the back or getting applauded for making a very insensitive, bigoted, or racist comment about something and immediately or not terminated? If I had said something like that, or our incredible author and producer here, Tamu Smith, said something like that, we would have been gone within an hour. Mm-hmm. And I understand her emotional capital and physical capital for news organizations and channels in the United States, but that just really threw me off. And what she had on there were people educating her. I didn't feel that she had done enough education for herself to be able to speak solidly on that topic, that she had not sharpened her intellectual ideas about the topic. If that was me, that night, I would have been in my room studying everything and then come and said, this is what I have learned, because she says that. She says, sometimes I talk, sometimes I listen, and I'm paraphrasing, but she's like, yesterday I learned. Mm-hmm. And I would have just done that. I would have found every book and brought on experts about, look, what is it that made me do this? And she didn't highlight, I come from a background of privilege, which is why I made those types of comments, because she did say that. She said, well, where I grew up, and I knew that was coming, and I'm not. But
you also don't get to make those mistakes. You don't get to do that. You can never make that mistake and think that you're going to show up on TV the next day to get to apologize.
Yeah.
Like we don't get to do that. But also, we understand that we have to apologize. Forgiveness isn't just given to us easily.
That's true. I mean, I always wonder how fast she would have learned had there been an African American on the set when that comment was made.
And there likely could have been.
Yes.
But she's not approachable, because when you are seen as the moneymaker, you actually who's going to say something to you if I'm not your boss?
Yeah. I'm going to transition a little bit now to telling your story, or telling our own story. Why is it important that blacks tell their own story?
As a storyteller, I think that, and watching other people tell our story, oftentimes they tell the story that they know of us. And the truth is that in white America, in this America, people who don't look like me, or people who don't or have not been in situations where they have been oppressed, they don't have to know my story, but I have to know theirs. They don't have to interact with me. I interact with white people daily. There are some white people that never come in contact with a black person. And sometimes some of those white people that have never come in contact with a person of color are oftentimes the ones who want to tell the story that they read. And sometimes when they tell those stories, it's told from a stereotypical standpoint. And so I do think that it's important for us to tell our own stories because we know the stories.
But Cameron, you say there's some dangers in telling our own story?
Well, one thing, can I just add to
Absolutely,
what Tango
yes.
says is that's why 71% of African Americans and Hispanics said this is why the media needs to be represented in this way. The danger that comes in that is the three of us are here today. How many white Americans, white members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will say, well, I heard those three speak, so they represent everyone. So they told their story this way, and that is the danger of it. Because what will happen is we then will be viewed as, well, you were speaking for an entire group. The same way, the same pitfall Jesse Jackson fell into. The same pitfall that Louis Farrakhan falls into with the Nation of Islam.
Absolutely.
So all these people, the same pitfall that Al Sharpton falls into. And so when people say, well, no, they'll look at me, they'll look at Tamu, they'll look at you, Othello, and say, no, that's your leader. And we were sitting there saying, like, that's not my leader. I didn't even elect him. I don't even know him. I've seen him on television just like you. And I would ask this question then, who specifically is the leader for whites? Who specifically is the leader for Hispanic Americans? Who specifically is the Asian American leader that we all can look to?
Right.
But blacks are assigned because most people will see this prominent figure speaking out loudly, a lot of times inaccurately or incomplete.
Donald Trump.
And so that becomes the challenge right there. And so that's where I think some of the limitations are when it comes to speaking out and most of the time just not being completely informed.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. We're going to switch gears now, talk to a student. First of all, I'd like to thank all those who are watching at Reed, at Morgan State University, at West Virginia University, and here in the Brim Hall building at BYU in the School of Communications. I'm joined now with Shai Andrea Jackson. Now, Shai, you are taking part in an internship in which you're putting together a newspaper and a website that is centered on minority-based news. Now, what inspired you to do this?
Well, see, I've been in Utah about 5 years now, and when I first came, I would get the weirdest questions, and I couldn't understand where these questions would come from. I would get asked, first thing, they don't know anything about me, are you an athlete? And I'm just like, why is that your first question? Why isn't it, what's your name, or where are you from? And I would get things like this all the time, and I couldn't figure out why. And so I started thinking about it, and in a state like Utah where the black population is so small, like almost non-existent, I realized that the only thing that they could know about me personally, my race, is things that they get from media, that they see on TV, movies, and everything. That's the only thing that they have to go off if they don't have a realistic or a person that they can experience and learn from. And so I created the news-based website to give people a chance to both hear other people's story, to be able to connect and relate to us, so we stop getting those awkward questions that you're like, why would you ask me that? And also to highlight minorities in ways other than violence or entertainment in the news, another light for people to see that I'm not just an athlete, I'm an individual and a person.
I can tell you, I've got my fair share of awkward questions as well. Now you were telling me that your grandmother, she has a different perspective when it comes to race issues involving blacks and whites.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was chatting with her the other day, and we were talking about racial issues, and she said to me, she was like, well, Shai, you know that if it wasn't for the few good white people that we had alongside us marching and fighting the cause, the black movement would have never gotten anywhere close to where it is today. And I know this, but like just hearing her say it really stuck with me. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And my grandma, she feels that the reason why, like almost like we're like backpedaling a little bit, because there's becoming this divide. Everyone wants to be pro-black or only pro-white. They want to identify with a side. And they're not actually focusing on the issues that are actually causing prejudice. They're not focusing on that anymore. And so by choosing these sides, we're just becoming more divided. Everyone just has their side and their perspective instead of actually taking on the problem. And so she explains that she doesn't think we don't even need these sides. We don't need them because when we were defeating prejudice and racism back in the day, it was non-minorities who was fighting that fight with us, and that's essentially how we got to where we are.
Now, you interviewed your grandmother yesterday or did a Skype. Let's go ahead and hear what she said.
What we've done today, I don't think Martin Luther King would be happy with it because he wanted to bring the nation together. But I've never been in such divided nation in my life. Unity was coming to America. Prejudices was being put down by blacks and whites together. And if we don't get back to that and try to unite our nation is falling apart.
It really moved me. I was like, man, Martin Luther King would be unhappy with this? Like, what? It's really special, and I really appreciate her insight because when you talk about racial issues, I normally only get one side. They're either, oh, I'm so mad at white people for doing this, but they never actually understand that that's actually what's kind of causing divide. And I see things that way because I was raised in a family that's my grandma. That's my personal grandma. My mom was raised like that as well. And so I'm able to see another side. I'm not saying that I'm justifying anyone's beliefs. I still get offended and I still get frustrated for sure, no doubt. But I'm saying that there is another side and you have to be willing to take on both sides and look at it from other people's views as well.
Looking from other people's view, you're telling me, so your grandmother recently visited you here in Utah for the first time. How did that go?
Well, so she came down and she was so excited to visit Utah because she has never really been anywhere. She, just the type of family I grew up, I didn't even travel until I came here for athletics, and we started traveling every week for track meets, and I was like, oh, I've never been here. I've never been to a beach, but I was kind of trying to let my family know that, okay, you might get some abnormal things here because we're kind of, people wonder, I don't know. And so I was like, you might get some stares. And so I kind of let them know that from the get-go, but until it actually happened, she didn't understand what I was saying. So we were at KFC, and we're just all having a good time. It's me, my mom, my stepdad, my grandma, just enjoying ourselves. I noticed that there was this white family sitting a couple tables down from us. And from the moment we walked in, like, I noticed it because I'm used to noticing it. Like, from the moment we walked in, they were just smiling at us. And it wasn't like, oh, yeah, you smile, you be polite, you say hi. It was like they were amazed with us. Like, they were still smiling 30 minutes later at us. Like, and my grandma, she leans over, like, towards when we get ready to leave, and she's like, Shy, dude, like, why is this lady been smiling at me the whole time? Like, it's almost awkward because it's like, no, it's not. Like, what's going on? Like, what is she looking at? And so I'm just like, you see, that kind of thing kind of happens here in Utah. Like, because we're not the norm. They're not used to just seeing a black family, and they're wondering where we're from and why we're here and all of these things. But if you're not a black person, you're not going to ever notice that, and you're not going to ever experience that. And so it's definitely interesting. She was like, it made me feel special, which is not how I would have reacted. I would have been like, that made me feel awkward. Like, I didn't like that, but my grandma was like, oh, I felt like $1 million because she was amazed at me. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting take.
Yeah. Then lastly, we'll talk about, so Brigham Young University, like many other universities, has a black student union. Mm-hmm. It's open to individuals of all races. Here at BYU, you said there is one white male that attends.
Yeah.
You talked to him about why.
Yeah, my friend Hiram, he's awesome. He's like a prime example of what I was saying earlier. That, like, when I'm around Hiram and he's at BSU, he's placing himself as a minority. This is what us as minorities, black people, to speak for myself. Like, I'm trying to get away from being a minority every day because I'm living that life every day here on campus, every day here in Utah. But Hiram purposely places himself as a minority in our BSU. And I was just interested and why he decided to do that. Because we're like, oh, we don't like that feeling. And he feels completely comfortable and at ease when he's with us. And so I asked him, I was like, do we make you feel like a minority? Do we make you, I wanted to know if, it was two-sided. Like, do we also make you feel at BSU like you don't belong there? Because that's how a lot of people say that it makes them feel here on campus and in Utah, being a Black minority. And so his response was pretty interesting.
So we have a tape there with Hiram.
Or my ancestors were pioneers, his ancestors were slaves. And seeing that our family history, our current life situations are so different, but yet we ended up in the same place. I don't go to BSU because, I want to be with all the Black kids. I go to BSU because friends, not as like my Black friends.
So your concluding thoughts there.
Yeah, I totally think people like Hiram, like to me, when I look at Hiram, I'm just like, okay, he realizes that the first thing he notices isn't that we're a different color. He notices that we are people. We're both humans. We're both at BYU studying. And a lot of people, I feel like the first thing they notice about me is that I'm a different color, and then they start thinking about how I'm different from them. And that's why we cannot connect, because they just started off with the differences. But when I'm with Hiram and when he's with us on campus and in our events, like he wears Black Lives Matter shirts, and people always look at him like, why are you wearing that? And he feels completely comfortable. I don't feel like he's trying to assimilate, become Black. He's being himself, and we're all normal because we're people. Just treat us all the same. There's a quote that I just watched the Hate U Give movie, and there's a quote on there, and it says that white people thought they were making a difference in Black people's lives as well. And it just really moved me.
Thank you so much. It's always great to get a student's perspective, because our students now are tomorrow's leaders as well. So thank you, and good luck with your internship and your special project that you're working on there, Shai Andrea. And so, we'll now be joined, Tamu and Cameron. First of all, the Ford Foundation conducted a survey. In the survey, the question that they asked was, do you think media portrays African Americans more positively, more negatively, or the same as reality? Now, more positively, whites responded 18%, blacks 13%, Hispanics 18%, Asians 12%. Okay, portrayed about the same, the media of African Americans, whites 36%, blacks 25%, Hispanics 32%. Now, this last one there, do you think the media portrays African Americans more positively, more negatively, or about the same? So more negatively, we have white Americans 46%, African Americans believe it 62% of the time they're portrayed negatively. Hispanic Americans think about this 50%, Asians 50%. When you see this, what are your thoughts as we talk about media portrayal of African Americans?
I don't believe anyone's lying or anyone feels that their representation is incorrect. I always like to lead off with that, because they're not. It's their reality. It truly is. It is your reality. And all we need is, if blacks are telling whites this, believe us. Just simply believe us, because we're living it. But whites are also telling us, well, this is what we do not see, and that is their reality. They're not incorrect, but the media is able to splice and cut what exactly it would like to highlight. We see that in movie portrayals. And one of the things that I had a conversation with someone, I said, one of the negative things is that I said, if you were a movie star, Cameron, would you ever dress up like a woman, like Tyler Perry with Medea, or how Larry Johnson used to be grandmama in basketball, things like that? I said, no. I said, because I believe it would fill a stereotype. And I said, and I don't want to play to that, because it's negative. I said, and that is why I truly do believe Black Panther was such a success, because its portrayal of this fictional modern day king was exactly, at no time was he compromised, at no time was he unyielding, at no time did he fit an American stereotype. Now, I do know that this is in the fictional nation of Wakanda that has never been conquered by white colonists. I do understand that. But that portrayal was powerful in so many communities, so powerful that I remember just seeing Asians dressed up like T'Challa. I saw everyone just dressed up like I'm running around saying, well, you know, eat Bombay, and then running down and going to take on Thanos. But I think it's important that we see that that was a positive representation. And if we could have more of that, and when I say we, I mean African Americans could have more of that, you would see this tide shift, because that too opened up an incredible discourse within our nation, which is still going today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tamara, you have some thoughts on this?
Oh, yeah, I completely agree with Dr. McCoy. I think that, you know, like he said, when we tell you that something is happening, believe us. But also, I think that it depends on you know, I think that sometimes when white America is looking at a television show or even the news, like when we say media, I'm thinking all media platforms. But and for this, I'll say television. We watch How to Get Away with Murder last night, and you know, you have the star of the show is an African American woman. But also, when I look at that, I'm like, well, I'm not a killer. She's also an attorney. She's, you know, she has all of these different things happening and going on, and so if I'm looking at that and somebody comes up to me and they think that I'm equal to, I can't even remember her name right now.
Viola Davis.
Viola Davis, yes. I'm thinking her character though. But Viola Davis and How to Get Away with Murder, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a law professor, and I don't have students that are helping me bury bodies. And so that could be seen as a negative stereotype to me, because I mean, she's elevated, but also she's elevated in doing negative things.
And there's this underlying current of her being a criminal.
Of her being a criminal, yes, even though she is an attorney and above the law. And so, you know, but I do think that movies like Black Panther and movies like my movie Jane and Emma, you know, that we are trying to buck those stereotypes and really just tell our story. And I remember when Black Panther came out, and I remember white people reading a couple of forums and Facebook posts and even some newspaper articles where white people were saying, I don't get it. Black people are dressed up and they're running around, and I'm like, Star Trek. You do get it. You don't want to get it, but I know you get it, because Star Trek, you have all of these other shows. What is it? The Warthofs or whatever. What is it? See?
Going to be Klingons?
No, anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's the little boy with the glasses and
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Yes. Harry Potter. So people dress up and they choose a team. That's not even real either. And so we get it. We just try to act like we don't get it. And I think that sometimes those of us who, the people of color, we are in a position to where we have to understand whiteness. Again, they don't have to understand us. And when we get the backup of white people solidifying what we're saying, that's when we're believed.
Thank you two so much. I mean, we could sit up here and talk for the next 2 hours, but
really,
unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you to our guests, Cameron McCoy and Tamu Smith there. Also, thank you to our audience who have been watching online. This is the final session of the Kerner Plus 50 Symposium, co-hosted by the Global School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Morgan State University in Baltimore, at the Reed College of West Virginia in West Virginia University, and here at the School of Communications here at Brigham Young University. So thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.